Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down and talking with sprint coach Hakan Andersson. Guys, we're going to talk training. We're going to sit down, and after we go through a little bit of Hakan's background, we're going to get right into talking about, what got him into the scientific end of training athletes. What actually drove him to do all the research that he does. And that was a pretty awesome and interesting discussion. After that, we're going to get into, how his role in athletics has influenced how he trains athletes in other sport disciplines. Hakan he works with swimmers, hockey players, he works with soccer players, just to name a few. And the influence of track and field on that is really fascinating to me. Then we're going to get into a little bit more about CNS fatigue and talking about the theories behind it and what he sees it as, what actually it is to him. He's got a great Hank story that he throws in there in the middle, and then we're going to get into talking about the role of weight training and jump training and how that's fit in with the different athletes he's worked with. And then we're going to finish that off talking about how strong is strong enough and what he sees the role of Olympic weightlifting in training athletes and why he uses them. And that's a really interesting topic that he has and an interesting viewpoint that he has as to why he uses the lifts. It was really a fascinating talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Hakan, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Jay. It's a privilege.
Well, let's start out with everybody watching and listening here. Just let's hear a little bit of your story from being an athlete to obviously where you're now as a coach. Let's give people a little rundown of your story.
Well, I'm a true dinosaur. I've been involved in track and field for the last 40 years. First 10 years as an athlete, and the last 30 years as a coach. And I've been involved with sports since that's a very young age, and I started with some martial arts, played football, hockey. I was a speed skater until I found track and field when I was about 17, 18. And I was pretty dead serious about my athletics, for until I was about 23, 24. And I gradually moved into coaching. I don't know why at the time. It just happened. Some friends started training with me, and eventually I started enjoying helping other people. I decided to finish my career and pick up coaching. But I'm not a full-time coach. I'm from the beginning. I'm a trained engineer, but I've been working with a fire brigade since I was 23 years old. There was an occupation that fitted very well with my sporting career, and I'm presently working as a senior officer. And as such, I can retire when I'm 58, and that can happen this year in November if I want to. So see what happens after then.
That's awesome. So an engineer in the fire brigade, which I'm assuming means you're a fireman.
Yes.
And you coach athletics.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting triangle. 3 really different realms, but the engineer part, I'm sure, has helped play in a little bit with the sports science realm. So can we talk a little bit about sports science in Sweden and how, the international perspective of that?
Well, when I started coaching, I took all the coaching, education there was and such, but one person that played a big role in my career in terms of sports science was a local doctor. I started coaching his daughter, and he really got me caught on trying to read real literature, and he opened a new world for me in terms of sports science, and he connected me with all the guys in CVASP, all the professors there that did and still does great scientific work, especially in terms of strength. And so he played a big role in that. He really pushed me to educate myself, and I still feel I'm a scholar of coaching. I've been doing this for 30 years, and every year I understand, how little I know, how much more there is to know, and it's a very challenging thing to be a coach, I find.
Yes. So, asking this, since Sweden is the talent pool isn't as big as like we have here in America. So, how has this scientific approach in your research helped improve with the talent that you're able to work with?
Well, it's hard to know, but me as a person, I like to understand as much as possible, and then I feel that the more I understand, the more precise I can be. I have a great friend in Norway, Leif Ola Alnes. He was coaching Gay Moen. It was one of the greatest European sprinters ever, and he says, as a coach, you can't be like a hunter with a shotgun. You have to have a rifle. You have to be more precise. You can't just go out and shoot like crazy in the woods. It costs so much energy. You have to be more precise, and you have to cut out everything that doesn't really, help you to improve. I think a lot of people do unnecessary things. We train too much. We train too frequent, and people break down.
Yeah, I couldn't agree any more with that, and especially coming from this country where definitely if one is good, 100 is awesome. So then looking at that, so you said that perspective started with your general practitioner, your family doctor.
Yeah, actually, I think being a scientist, I have this critical thinking that that I really found appealing, that not just to believe everything that people say, I mean, sport is based on science, but also on empirical, experience, and very easy to do. What we did in the past, is sometimes hard to change because we're very conservative, and so he started, he taught me to question everything we do, that was his biggest contribution, I find.
That's really neat, especially coming from someone in the medical field that really would have a lens looking from the outside in to talk with a coach about being more investigatory.
Yeah.
I think is pretty awesome. Now, you've obviously made your name in athletics, in track and field, but we also know that you've helped quite a bit of other professional athletes. How has your time working in athletics and working in track and field helped with the soccer players that you've worked with?
Well, like most track and field coaches, I've been prostituting myself in almost every sport, try to make a buck, But I've really been enjoying do that too. I don't do it so much anymore because I find I don't have the time, But I've been working with, professional hockey players, soccer, basketball, you name it, I've been doing it, and some individual athletes too on the Olympic levels, swimmers, boxers, you name it. But it's basically I've been using same principle. They have been interested in either running speed or explosive strength. It's basically the same principle I find like we use in track and field. It doesn't vary so much. The problem is that some of those sports, they train a lot of endurance. Like take a swimmer for instance. Even a 50-meter freestyler, they swim 7-8 kilometers per day. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to all the explosive strength or the speed you try to develop, it kind of drowns in endurance. And it's the same with the soccer players. They put so much emphasis into endurance, aerobic endurance, and so on. So if you try to develop speed at a mature age, it's very difficult. So I think it's in those kind of sports, it's very important that you do more of that kind of work as a junior, because when you come up to a professional level, it's very hard to develop. But what is easier to develop is strength, But so you can try to to develop, running capacity and through the weight room more than actually sprinting. And it's also a way to stay healthy. It's because at the end of the day, it's more important that the guys can play than they are 200ths of a second faster in a 30-meter acceleration test. They have to play every Sunday, sometimes even two games in a week.
So when you look back at your time with swimmers, ice hockey players, and soccer players, you find that a lot of the same methods and ideas translated directly from the track over to these sports.
I mean, you take things here and there, but some sports varies. Like look at swimming. There's hardly any stretch shortening. There's hardly any eccentric work. It's a very very concentric event. So it's no use doing hurdle jumps or reactive jumping to develop elasticity with a swimmer because they don't use it. You can, but there is some part of the strength training that we use in track and field. They can use, of course.
That's awesome. It's funny that you bring that up because that's something that we've talked about with our swim team here at the university and the club team that I work with quite a bit. Is that everybody wants to talk about how much they have to do jumps and jumps and jumps. Mm-hmm. And it's like, because, you hit the wall and then there's the stretch shortening cycle. And I'm like, well, sort of, not really like on the ground. So I'm really happy to hear you say that.
You don't work against gravity like in track and field, that's for sure.
No, and you're supported.
Yeah, exactly.
No, so we have a mutual friend or two, but one in particular. What are some of the best things that you've taken from Mr. Henk Kragenhoff?
Well, first time I met Henk, it was actually, I think it was in 1992. I read a very interesting article in one of the American journals that really stood out. And it was a Dutch author, and it was Henk. So eventually I managed to get his telephone number and phone him up. I think it was like a Monday or Tuesday, and introduced myself. I'm a young coach in Sweden. I was really impressed about your work, and could I come and visit you? And I said, yeah, of course. Can you come on Friday? So I managed to get some money together to buy a ticket, and I went down to Henk in Amstelveen outside Amsterdam, and he was so open and friendly from day one. We sat in his library. I was surrounded by about 2,000 books. And he was completely open, and he has been a great inspiration and a great. He's been a great mentor all these years. When I feel it's something I need to discuss, if I have a question, he's always there. He's always super helpful, and he's probably one of the most holistic coaches I ever met. He's a great guy.
Oh yeah, one of the best.
Yeah.
Both as a coach and a person. And it's funny, he always talks about the library, and you can always see it when you talk to him online. And his joke is, there may be 3,000 books here, but there's not a page that I haven't read either.
No, he's a great guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that our other friend, our mutual acquaintance, Carl, wanted me to bring up was he wanted us to talk about CNS fatigue and your experience trying to measure that. So let's get into that a little bit, and then and we can go from there.
CNS fatigue is one of these murky topics, that has been popularized among the sporting community, and to be honest, I don't think anyone of us really knows what we're talking about, And I mean, if you talk about a 100-meter sprint, the speed, decelerates at the end, but I don't think there are scientists in the world that can tell you exactly why. And I usually bring up, when I lecture too, sometimes, why can't you lift a maximum weight twice? And, soon we're going to have a man on Mars. We are building buildings that are a kilometer high. We have doctors that do operations with robots, but we don't know why the speed drops in a 100-meter race and why we can't lift a maximum weight twice. But you're probably right. It has something to do with the nervous system, And Tim Noakes, you probably know, the Australian scientist, when it central governor theory, is based on endurance, but it probably plays a role in sprinting as well. Something happens in the muscle between the ears, But it's very hard to know exactly what. But what I think, I think the brain is probably it probably recovers a lot faster than the muscle, So sometimes I doubt, the theory that stressing the nervous system every day is too stressful. I think I don't think we have the whole picture there actually. Of course, people can get burned out, in the brain by working too much, and living a stressful life, But when it comes to central nervous system fatigue, it's still very murky. And but the theory that we can't stress high intensity every day is valid, It doesn't really matter if it's seen as fatigue or if it's a muscular fatigue. You can't sprint flat out every day. We know from experience that maybe you can sprint with high intensity maybe twice in 7 days. That's about it. You can't tolerate more. So it's very in terms of training. I think that, the density is very important when you plan your training. And. But if you're stressing your central nervous system, into fatigue, or if it's your muscle fatigue, or if it's a combination, I really don't know.
That's interesting. That's a really awesome way to look at it when you say, why can't you lift the maximal weight twice? And that's actually like word for word what Carl said. He was like, ask him why you can't lift the maximal weight twice.
Yeah, I don't know, and this is a question I've been asking a lot of sports scientists, and I don't get a straight answer, So it's I'm not alone.
Yeah.
But it's a popular topic, and all sort of the devices, to measure central nervous system fatigue, But I don't know. Sometimes I find, we've been using a lot of different systems, they're interesting and there might be some validity, but I find that the integration and the communication with the athlete is a lot of times a better tool, and to talk about, how they feel, how they slept, how they're looking forward to the training, how the general life is, or if they feel, if fatigued, or if they feel sluggish, and you talk to them when they warm up, you watch them when they're warming up, all those sort of things are, I find, more important than to measure with devices. It can be an extra asset, of course, because sometimes you don't get the whole picture. Sometimes maybe by some reasons the athletes are not completely honest. I don't know. Maybe especially in team settings, they scared of losing a spot on the team or something. But I find with athletes I've been working with, and I try to develop a good relationship, so you can have a honest communication, and I think that's the name of the game actually. It's communication, and to understand that athletes are not only athletes. They're having a life on the side too. That sometimes can be very stressful, and it's certainly going to affect your performance, both in competitions and in everyday training.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's kind of been more and more of a buzz, especially in the States, when it comes to stress management and athlete management and looking at things like that. But I think the point that you brought up, that you seem to find that building that relationship and talking with the athletes is the best tool of all of them. And what most people at least those that I talk with, keep coming back to, is all of these tools need to just continue to open the conversation. And you need to own whatever you're doing. And if it doesn't drive conversation, then it's kind of just a bell and a whistle that isn't making any noise, you know? But no, that's really neat. And I think there's some really awesome points in there, and questioning the whole thought process. Because everybody really either, I mean, you're kind of in the central governor camp or you're not. I think more people are inclined to believe that theory than to go against it at this point. But I really do. I think that those are all awesome points. Like, how do we know? We don't know. You know, the smartest sports scientists in the world don't know. How does a little strength and conditioning coach in Richmond, Virginia, have any idea what he's talking about? You know?
No. Yeah, it's complicated. You know, I always bring up another thing. You know, sometimes we think that sports is super developed or everything is a product of science. You know, the Greeks, they were having Olympic Games for 1,000 years. The Asian Games continued for 1,000 years, and it was so important that even, you know, they put a halt on war to have the host the games. Eventually, it was banned for corruption and cheating. You know, but they did it for 1,000 years, and they had professional coaches, they had professional athletes. We don't know, because we don't know how good they were there, because we don't, there's no results. You know, they didn't have a timekeeping equipment. You know, but they did it for 1,000 years. We don't even have a clue. You can see on all paintings and so that could see sprinters were really muscular developed. You know, it was if it was a part of the genetic. It was a genetic product, or if it was training. We don't know, but. And I think there is so much we can develop in sport, and I'm afraid sometimes, that I think the use of performance-enhancing drugs has really hampered development of sport, because you didn't have to really worry about what to do too much. You athletes were taking the pills and taking some injections, and it kept on improving, But I think there's so much more you can do, and so much more we can improve, that you didn't even have to think about, drugs. If you are to continue doing sports drug-free for another 1,000 years, we can't even imagine what kind of results we would do in that 1,000 years. So there's definitely lots of rooms for improvement.
Oh, no doubt. And it's funny you bring up the artwork, because the last time Hank was in Virginia, we went to the Museum of Fine Arts downtown here.
Yeah.
You'll have to ask him to send you the picture of the vase. There's a vase.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a sprinter. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, man, the cat's thighs in this painting were it was like body, thighs.
Yeah.
The body looked like a finger, and the thighs looked like the shoulders. It was unbelievable. He's like, look.
Huge hamstrings.
Yeah, that's what he said. He goes, look, even back then, huge hips, huge thighs.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the next time we talk to Hank, have him send you that picture. Hank, if you're listening, send Hakan the picture. He'll love it.
Yeah.
Now, most people that listen to these talks are strength and conditioning coaches. So could you give a little background and a little bit of your experience when it comes to the weight training and the plyos in conjunction with what you do with your athletes?
Weight training and jumping, plyometrics, stretch shortening kind of exercises, when you work against gravity, they're all very potent training, I find. They're very, very effective. If it is the right athlete at the right time with the right preparation. I mean, I think you would do a huge mistake, if you take a 28-year-old hockey player, starting doing lots of work jumping over hurdles with him. People, they would just break down, And I think if you're to use plyometrics or jumping, you have to start at a fairly young age. You have to learn how to jump, and it's much easier the earlier you start. especially when your body doesn't weigh so much. And some people seem to be natural jumpers, some other people don't seem to, but can still run faster. So don't think you can say in general everyone has to do plyometrics, or that sport can. It all depends on the athlete, and where is the preparation and so on, And when you talk about team sports, is most of the time it's not a matter, it's not a matter of maximizing performance like in sprinting. It's a matter of optimizing, or you can even perform well as a soccer player or hockey player, having physical levels at a medium level, and you don't have to take any chance, you don't have to gamble, Track and field athletes, we're hitting the ceiling, you run into plateaus, and when you don't develop, and then you maybe have to take a little bit of risks to develop. And sometimes in track and field we do stupid things, because people want to improve. But I think you can play it more safe in most team sports. But there is a room for jumping. But as I said, you have to be very, very careful.
So would there be a chance of maybe getting an example of some things that you've done, maybe with a swimmer versus a soccer player or an ice hockey player?
Well, like an ice hockey player, he's having his feet in a cast for 7 months of the year. So everything, working up on your toes, stressing your plantar flexors is dangerous for him. But if you work in a low position on a whole foot, doing jumps sideways or jumping, like a skate jumping up hills and stuff, when the impact is not so high, is great for him, And it's very easy to combine with other types of training. And when you talk about swimming, I think the resistance training, working with weights, is much more important than jumping. Of course you have the start, and maybe you can use jumping, for neural drive. It's a great way of getting recruitment. But as I said, it's a danger for them as well. Soccer players is a little different. They're usually lighter. They run on grass and they jump. And the problem with sometimes when you talk about strength and conditioning, you have to analyze the game. You have to analyze what they already do in their sport. And if you take a forward in soccer, maybe he jumps 5 or 10 times in a game. So that's not enough, to get any kind of adaptation. So if you think that jumping ability is important for soccer players, to be a good header, it's something you have to break out. And of course, vertical jumping is a good way of doing it. But you also have to understand that jumping on grass is different from jumping on a rubber surface, So you have to adjust it to where they perform their sport. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And then just going back through the three, because obviously those are three things that you've had good success with those athletes. The vertical jumping with the soccer and the skater bounds up a hill with hockey. Are there any specific lifts that you said, when I worked with a hockey player versus a swimmer versus a soccer player, footballer, we had more success with those?
I think there is a common theme. I think it's Olympic lifting, And what is so great about Olympic lifting, that the cleans and the snatch and so on, that they involve so many muscle groups in one exercise. So you have so much more time to rest than working, sitting in machines and working. It takes all day. But you can get a weight training routine, done in 20 minutes. And you more or less work your whole body, and so I'm a big favor of Olympic weightlifting. But there's another thing, it depends who's the athlete, the experience, where does he want to go. So, I mean, if you start working with a professional soccer club and you have a professional player that is 32 years old that's never seen a barbell, I mean, it's a waste of time to teach him how to clean. You know, it's going to take 3 years. He's going to be retired before he masters it, before he get anything out of the training. So just as in jumping, lifting is a basic movement. You should start at a fairly early age, and the earlier you start to learn it properly, the more effective you can be when it starts to count. But also, it is effective to a certain point. You know, when you talk about European sprinting, and I think some people has gone completely berserk, and you develop strength to a level that is not necessary. I mean, you don't have to, as a sprinter, that if you weigh, 70 kilos, you don't have to clean 150. Maybe 120 is enough. And those extra 30 kilos doesn't give any extra add to your performance. It's just give you maybe perhaps extra weight. So, and we have a lot of bad examples with that, in my country and the rest of Europe, that sometimes maybe we overemphasize, strength training. Maybe it's the same in the States. I don't really know.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it's funny, there's a PhD in Missouri named Dr. Brian Mann, who earlier on this podcast talked about how with American football players, they ran like a longitudinal study, and they found that like with the back squat, so not a clean, just a regular old squat, that it was like 2 to 2.5 times their body weight. Once an athlete could do that, they didn't see as much carryover. But I think that the $1 million question with what we do always is going to be how strong is strong enough.
Yeah, exactly.
There's going to be some people who just naturally could, rip a bar off the floor and catch double their body weight, like they're just picking up a piece of paper. Do they need to get any stronger? Or is the fact that they're naturally strong the thing that makes them better than other people? So that's what we should work on more, because what you're good at is what makes you special.
Sometimes too, it's easy to mix up strength, specific strength to specific, strength in the weight room, or strength when it comes to jumping, I'm sure Henk can tell you all sort of stories, of world-class sprinters he coached that has been really weak in the weight room. But when it comes to a specific movement on the track, they're super strong, And I'm coaching a young sprinter at the moment, he weighs 63 kilos. Maybe he can squat 125, 130, but he has the fastest acceleration I ever seen, He's super fast. And, he could put on extra 10 kilos on his body weight, maybe he would improve, a couple of hundreds in the 30, but it would slow him off, at the maximum velocity at the end of the race, So it's always a balance, and you have to see who is in front of you, and it's very tempting to work in the weight room, because it's very easy to detect improvements. Every kilo on the bar, it's a very direct feedback that you're improving. It's much more difficult to monitor development of speed. Especially if you have a long microcycle. And it's much harder to monitor how you're progressing.
Yeah. And really, though, with almost all sports, what the scary part is the speed is what's most important.
Yeah, for sure.
But, Hakan, this is absolutely awesome. I can't thank you enough for staying up with me today and, giving us about 35, 40 minutes here of some just great information. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and send my regards to my grand mentor, Henk Reinhoff. And best of luck with your seminar, okay?
Oh, thank you so much. And a huge thank you to today's guest, sprint coach Hakan Andersson. Absolutely fantastic stuff, talking CNS fatigue, his opinions of that, Olympic weightlifting, his opinions of that, getting into the role of the weight room and developing athletes. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Gems all the way around. Can't thank Hakan enough for taking the time to be on with us today and to stay up late to talk with me for a little bit. So, Hakan, thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk as much as I did. And as always, if you did, please share it in the social media outlet of your choice. Any questions, thoughts, what helped, any ideas to contribute, go ahead and leave them below, whether it be on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or on the page itself. We'd love to hear back from you guys, just trying to build conversations and get things going. And as always, guys, thank you for being a part of what we're doing here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We'll be back next week with another episode of the podcast and another fantastic guest. We will see you then.